special meeting of the Municipal Council to order at 6 p.m. Please join me for a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please read the notice of the special meeting?
Yes, Mr. President. Date, July 29th, 2022. To the members of the Municipal Council. From James Delisio, President. Councilors, by authority of Article 2, Section 2-7C of the Attleboro Home Rule Charter, I hereby call a special meeting of the Municipal Council as follows. Date, Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022. Time, 6 p.m. Place, 7070 Park Street, Council Chambers. Meeting, purpose, with the Water Superintendent. Sincerely, James Delisio, President.
Thank you. I would like to entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Thank you. We will have a roll call vote beginning with Councilor Waterman.
Mr. Waterman.
Yes.
Mr. Conti.
Yes.
Vice President Kobus.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds, excuse me.
Yes.
Mr. Angelo.
Yes.
Ms. DeSimone.
Yes.
Mr. Blair.
Yes.
President Delisio.
Yes.
9 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. We are suspending the rules tonight. We only have really two pieces of business in front of us tonight. I've asked the Water Superintendent, Courtney Allen, to address the council. We'll get to that in one moment. But first, we only have one committee report, and for that, I would recognize Councilor Conti.
Thank you. From reporting for the Finance Committee from the docket of August 16, 2022, I move to call a public meeting for August 18, 2022 on the following request: to nullify the previous tax increment exemption TIE resolution voted on May 4th, 2021 for 2739 South Main Street LLC, and authorize a revision as stated in the following resolution for the mayor to enter into a TIE agreement with 27-39 South Main Street LLC pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40V, Section 4, Paragraph B, I, and Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5M.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's in order. Any comments?
Yes. I've been working on the background information for the TIE and a lot of other financial information that's in our budget message to meet with the mayor to move our budget message forward. And in the process of doing some of that research, I noticed that we had a public hearing for the project over on Union Street in the former Ingraham building. And I thought it fair and just that we have a public hearing for this one as well, it being a similar TIE project. And I failed to call for one previously and felt the urge to call for one so that we could have the developer here on Tuesday night. We could have a public hearing turned out to be a public meeting, and I'll explain that, for Thursday night so that we could try to get through all that business in 1 week. I made the request to have a public hearing, but in a conversation with the city solicitor, our administrative assistant asked me to change that from a public hearing to a public meeting, which I agreed to on recommendation from the city solicitor. And we can get further clarification on that in the future because this all happened in the last 30 seconds. And I would urge my councilors to allow this to go through so that we can have a public meeting to hear from the public on this issue. And that concludes my comments.
Great. Additional comments, questions, concerns, Councilor DeSimone.
Yeah, thank you, President Delisio. Councilor Conti, first of all, thank you for calling the hearing. I agree. I think it's appropriate. You can never go wrong by having things aired out. But may I inquire, will you be inviting other guests to come, or is it just the developer, or is the Economic Development Director?
On Tuesday night, we specifically invited the developer only to address one issue only, and that is what has changed between May 4th, 2021 and currently, as a background for their request for a revision of the TIE agreement. So on Tuesday night, there will only be the developer here.
Okay.
On Thursday night at 7 o'clock, it's open season. It's a public meeting. Anybody can come, and we'll try to restrict their comments to 3 minutes to give them an opportunity. They can prepare their documents and submit them to the committee through the administrative assistant. And if we have a full house, we have a full house. We'll deal with it.
May I just follow up?
Of course.
So that includes members of the administration. I'm just thinking of Catherine Farrick. If she wanted to come, they don't need to be invited, Council Conti, to the public meeting?
No, I know that there's conditions for a public hearing,
Yeah.
but I do not believe there are any limitations to a public meeting.
Fair enough.
And between now and then, I'll find out.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so Council Conti, to that point, thank you for that. We just found out about the concept of a public hearing this afternoon. Kate, Virginia, and I have been looking into it, so we'll have that clarification. And part of that clarification is going to be if you're going to have that public meeting, should the developers still come down that Tuesday night. So we'll get that. We'll figure out what's we'll get the solicitor to give us an opinion as to what is a meeting versus a hearing, who can call for it, who can come down and speak. I think there's advertising differences with a public meeting. It doesn't have to be advertised in the paper in the same way. But we'll get that for the council just for the edification. I think this could revolutionize to a lesser extent how we do things.
Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough for the support you're showing my committee in this matter, because frankly, everything's developing so quickly, and in the summertime,
Yeah.
both you and the administrative assistant have been a great help. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Vice President Copus.
Thank you. And if I could, through you to the chair, just to let you know, I did email the Economic Development Director my list of questions, and just since we can't talk with open meeting laws, I'll let you know what the information I specifically asked for, and I assume you've also asked
Point of order,
for
this
that.
is not a committee meeting, therefore we cannot get into it. I would like
enough.
to pull
Got
it back where we have a guest. Let's
Fair
think about this as just about calling for a public hearing.
That's it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the business the Finance Committee has to bring before the council this evening.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to a meeting at the next appropriate time.
We'll let you know exactly when that appropriate time is. So thank you all for coming out tonight on relatively short notice. I've invited Courtney Allen, the water superintendent, to address the council to talk about the water emergency. We've all been receiving calls from residents. We've had been stopped when we're out at the supermarkets, at the farmers market, wherever we may be. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of conjecture out there. So I figured it would make sense to bring in Superintendent Allen to answer our questions. To the residents I've spoken with, a lot of them aren't aware of, A, if there is a water ban or water restrictions, B, that exactly what they are. I think it's appropriate to have the superintendent join us tonight to provide that information and more to this honorable body. The intent of this meeting is not an inquisition, it's not an interview. What this is the opportunity for this council to ask questions, get answers, and get a handle on the extent of the severity of the water emergency that we're facing. I've been communicating via email with Superintendent Allen over the course of this week and last, and I do appreciate, if you want to come to the podium, Courtney, I do appreciate the professional manner in which you've been replying back. Thank you for that. I have asked Virginia to forward and print copies of the email exchanges that I've had with Courtney, so you're all kind of up to speed on where we're at. Courtney, thank you for joining, and thank you for getting back to me last Friday night while you were at home ill. So I do appreciate that, and I hope you're feeling better.
I'm feeling absolutely wonderful compared to last week.
Great. And I know, we have several questions that I want to raise, just review some of the ones that you and I have already talked about, then we'll open it up to the council. I know that there's a lot of discussion right now about the Pawtucket interconnection, and I know that this project first came in front of this council under the Dumas administration with the intent of helping to combat climate resiliency and to offset drought conditions as they come. Superintendent, do you mind giving us a brief update of that project, where we're at, and even per our conversations, we talked about the impact it would have on the situation we're in currently if that was up and running now?
Sure.
Thank you.
Where we currently stand with the Pawtucket interconnection is it's permitted through DEP. It's all approved. The project actually went out to bid in mid-May. We received one single bid. That one single bid was at a cost of about twice what we have for funding for the project. So obviously, we had to not accept that one single bid. In talking to vendors, it was determined there was a little bit of, or more than a little bit of hesitance on their part on bidding this project. Reason being, it's actually a very simple project once it's in. It's a small prefab pumping station. Everything's basically assembled off-site, delivered to the site, and installed, wired in, hooked up to our main on one side and Pawtucket's on the other side. So the construction portion of it is very, very simple. The hesitance was the bulk of the cost and the bulk of the lead time on this project is the pumping station itself. We're looking at, and this has actually gotten worse since we bid it, at the time of bid, we were looking at a 14-month lead time for a contractor to put money out there and order a pumping station that's over half the cost of the project and sit there and wait with escalating labor costs, escalating material costs, and all that just sitting out there and getting worse in the next year and a half. So what we have looked at internally and with CDM and discussions with NBC is the potential of pre-ordering the station ourselves, taking that lead time and all of that away from the contractor. It'll open up more potential bidders. It takes a lot of the risk away from them because they will eventually be bidding with a station ready to install. Again, we spoke earlier at NBC, and the lead time of the station since May has gotten worse. So now we're looking at if everything falls right in a row just like it should, and we hope that it does, we're looking at probably installation and startup of about 2 years from now, so summer of '24.
So from start to finish, when the council first approved it back in 2016 to completion and it being online, we're looking at almost a 10-year span.
Yeah, about 8 years.
Okay. What, if that was online prior to the emergency, because we're hearing that a lot from residents and former people who have an understanding of the project. They're asking what would the impact of that interconnection be on this current emergency if it was up online now?
Sure. To actually use the station, if the station was in place and operational today, at this point, we would be using it. However, we have to understand in our contract with Pawtucket and our permitting with DEP, we have to be in full water restrictions to be able to use it. So the station isn't there so, people can still water lawns and fill pools, which is really nice, for sure. It's there for, this is our last resort to be able to feed the system. It also has to be local water restrictions. The mayor can declare a restriction with input from me. To be able to start up this interconnection, I can't just locally declare an emergency and start the station. It has to be an approved emergency through DEP. At this point, it would be, but just a normal, if we were on our annual restrictions that we're going to have every year, that's not an emergency to start the Pawtucket station once it's in place.
Okay. Before, I just want to get through kind of my list of questions.
Well, where does that approval come from, if I could?
I believe she said the mayor.
It comes from the DEP section chief.
Deep, okay.
We contact them directly. The turnaround for an emergency startup of a station can be anywhere from 2 hours to 48, depending on the situation.
Okay. So a follow-up to that is if it was online now, we have the restriction, would it be adding enough to our water system to pull back these restrictions?
Eventually, again, we couldn't lift restrictions until the station would be back offline.
Yep.
It would give us an extra 1 million gallons a day. Right now, our production is just under 6 million gallons per day. When a lot of the problems we're seeing is compliance with the current water ban. Our average summer day, I mean, we can go as high as 10 million, but our typical average is about 6.5. So with current restrictions in place and current compliance, we've only cut off 500,000 gallons a day. But with a Pawtucket station running, that would make up 1 million of that. So I mean, it would make up about 15% of the current production.
But only 15%.
Only 15%.
So I think there's.
So we would still
I think
need,
there's thought out there that it would have been the magic bullet, but that's not the reality.
it's not. We need to get the water use itself down so that 1 million being 15%, all of a sudden that 1 million is 25%, which is a huge number.
And then, speaking of interconnections, you and I spoke about interconnections in North Attleboro, Norton, and Seekonk.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what those are? I don't know that there's a lot of edification of the council on that.
Sure. Those are old and existing. They've been out there for years. We have 3 interconnections with North Attleboro. They're all up North Main, Kelly Boulevard. They're all in the area of the fish hatchery. There's 2 that exist with Norton. One's on the Pleasant Street town line, and the other one's on Slater Street. We also have 2 with Seekonk. One is on 152 over near the old West Wind, and the other one is on Oak Hill Avenue near the town line. We have full plans, we have full agreements in place to use all of these. The issue is our neighboring communities are in the same boat we are. Those interconnections, in my time with the water department, I've seen one actually used, and it was with Norton Water Department. And it was for an emergency main repair out off of Wilmarth. And long story short, if you looked at a map of our system, there is one valve that if you shut it off, that whole entire southeast area of the city gets shut off. So that was the use for that particular connection. None of these other departments, even outside Drought, really has the ability to supplement water use for an entire summer. The only local department that does is Pawtucket, which is why we've really been pushing this station.
Sure. Superintendent, can you walk us through really how dire is the situation? What is it that we're looking at, and what are the remediation steps?
Sure. Right now, we brought Wading River back online at the end of July. That was not an easy decision to make because of PFAS. But it operates off of a completely different watershed than does the larger plant on West Street. We've also actually seen a little bit of rain in the other watershed, which is helpful. We've seen none down here. The reservoirs refill when it rains. Right now we're getting 1.4 million gallons a day out of there, so just under 25% of our production is coming from Wading River. When we can get our production down a little bit, it could make up almost half. So that's the Wading River end. In West Street, the West Street watershed, we have 4 reservoirs that feed the main plant. For the summer, we use Manchester and Manchester only. I've talked a lot about Manchester through the years down here. So we all kind of realize that Manchester is filled only by direct rain. So if it rains an inch, Manchester goes up an inch. The rest of the time, Manchester is filled from pumping basically from the other reservoirs in the system. The reason this situation is so dire right now is not Manchester itself. Manchester, best guess, if it doesn't rain a single drop for the next 9 months, that is about when we will be empty. The problem is the other 3 reservoirs. So the rest of the time we operate off of Orr's Pond. Orr's Pond gets runoff from all over the city when it rains, as does Luther and Hoppin Hill from further north. Luther and Hoppin Hill are the 2 that we use to fill Manchester. Hoppin Hill is currently basically empty. We have 3 feet of water. So best guess usable volume in there right now, full is 200 million gallons. We probably have about 20 million. If it does not start raining with that reservoir empty, we do not have a way to fill Manchester come the winter when it comes back offline. So what we're looking at, and I sent an email out late this morning or early this afternoon with updated restrictions that we're gonna put in place to preserve Manchester as long as we can, and in hopes that the rest of the system basically fills up. And if we curtail water use, we get West Street production right now is about 4.6 million gallons a day. We can get it down to 2.5 or less. That's really the goal, and that production cut in half. That 9 months will become a year and a half of length of time for Manchester.
Superintendent, can you walk us through what the new restrictions are?
The new restrictions, they're going to be starting Saturday morning, and it is no outdoor water use that is non-essential till further notice. So what will be allowed, if residents want to fill a pool, they're going to have to purchase water from somewhere else. If they want to house wash, car wash, driveway wash, they can purchase from somewhere else. No other outdoor use. What still is allowed, hand watering of vegetable gardens. We do have a couple horse farms and things like that in the area, people that need to keep their livestock and their animals safe and healthy. That's obviously allowed, and anything that's otherwise essential to a business. We have a couple, we have like a tree farm. There's another farm right over around the corner from us at the plant as well. So they will be allowed to water because it is their livelihood.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, and I know you responded in the email, but for the public, can you talk about the current depths of the reservoirs?
Sure.
Thank you.
I do have some updates since I sent the email. Every single reservoir in our system right now is currently below average depth for this time of year. A couple of them are slightly, Orr's Pond is just slightly. The concerns, again, is we're looking at Hoppin Hill. Full is 23 feet deep. We're currently at 3 feet deep. Manchester is just a hair under average. We're about 6 to 8 inches under the average for the end of July. But again, the concern with that one is what's upstream to be able to fill it. The other watershed, currently Miramichi, which is the biggest reservoir in that system, is 1 inch down. We have started releasing water from there this week to fill Blake's Pond. Blake's Pond is 28 inches down. There is an average level for Blake's. However, it's a very, very small, it's not really meant as storage. It's basically just a river diversion to feed the smaller plant. So the bigger concern up there is Miramichi, and that we're actually using it. We started releasing water from there this week, and we have not released since 2018, and we only released then for less than a week.
And can you just give me the correlation between inches in the reservoirs and how that relates to gallons?
Sure. The one I can give you the most information on is certainly Manchester. Manchester, we do have actually quite a bit of historic knowledge on what an inch will actually give us to feed the plant. Rule of thumb for Manchester, 6 inches of water will give us 6 million gallons a day for a week. So you're looking at a ballpark of 40 to 45 million gallons per foot. Now that is the upper levels of Manchester. Obviously, reservoirs aren't built as square like a swimming pool. They do get narrower as they go down. But you will find that, rainfall will affect the level more on a lower level. You'll find that evaporation will be less. So that 6 inches will stay relatively consistent as we go down the reservoir.
And with it being where it is right now, just the entire situation, we saw that there was media done, which talked about the hospital, talked about the fire prevention, which was a little disheartening, from being honest, that we had to hear about really the severity of this via the media as opposed to a direct communication. That's neither here nor there for this discussion. What concerns do you have about the city's fire department and their ability to be able to provide the level of protection needed in a city this size?
At this point, there is not a concern. It's something we really need to see what the new restrictions are going to do. They are going out. It's on the website. It will be going out by the Notify Me that residents can sign up for. That's all happening Friday. The notices are going direct mail to every service address. They're in the mail, going into the post office on Friday. So residents should start seeing them Saturday and Monday. We should see a drastic drop off on production right away. If that happens, then the firefighting isn't a concern, but that's why we're doing this. If we don't see this production go down and it doesn't start raining, we'll know pretty quick, and those discussions need to start.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit more about the messaging? I know, when there's the expo for the census, the fireworks, we have the highway, electronic highway boards. Is there discussion about getting some of those online to really let people know what's going on?
We have a couple, actually the city has 3 of them. We have one of them that we're working on getting registered. We can't leave the plant yard with it, unfortunately. The other one is sitting at the driveway. I know there is one that belongs to DPW and it's being used right now. We're looking at, the possibility of even something small and printed that we can do, like a smaller, like standing billboard or something like that. To get those out quickly can be a little rough. And it doesn't help tremendously at this point this year. The intent is next year we always have those seasonal restrictions. We are going to have them forever from May 1st to September 30th and forever. The state is never going to take that away. So the plan is next year, at least to get people into the mindset of the water ban, that is going out as direct mail next spring. With a link to the website. The current new restrictions are going out as direct mail. The reason we don't normally do that for an elevated level restriction is I started working on quotes to get these printed over 2 weeks ago. They're going out Friday. It's not a super timely way to do them during the year.
Yeah.
But everything we have going out is, and even when people call the department, we're doing everything we can to get everybody to sign up for web notices, because at this point, we don't have a better way to reach people quickly. We used to have the reverse 911, and it's funny because the last time we had restrictions even similar to this was back in 2016 during the drought. We did use a reverse 911. It reached more people than we did this year, but not a tremendous amount. At this point, we can't even use it because the system was set up to hit landlines. A lot's changed between 2016 and 2022. Nobody has a landline anymore.
I do.
Yeah, some people do. It's about 10% of the population. So that's not really an effective way anymore. So, I mean, we're doing our best with our department to get people to sign up for these notifications, because most of the population will get text and email. To try to draw notice to, hey, once in a while check the website because there's notices on there, or there's interesting things to look at, or important information.
What about partnering with state agencies such as MEMA, FEMA?
I'm sorry?
Partnering with state agencies such as MEMA, FEMA, maybe even other state agencies that can help with loaning us some of those message boards, because I think that those work.
I can certainly look into it.
Great, I'd appreciate that. And then, one thing that I would like to ask, and then I'm going to open it up to the council for their questions. I'd like to see, and I'd like to invite you back in September for an update where we're at.
Sure.
I'd also like to, I'll work with the Director of Budget Administration to see how ARPA funds are being used to help water delivery systems and see if there's anything we can do there. But I think at this point, that's all I have. I'd like to, actually, one, and then we'll get going. What is your prediction for precipitation over the next 60 to 90 days? I know you're not a meteorologist, but I also know that I'm sure you're keeping your eye to the sky.
I constantly have my eye on that radar. It's hard to tell. State level, they're predicting that this can go on for quite a while and into the fall.
Yeah.
And we're even seeing it on the radar. I mean, we'll see days of predicted rain, and you can see the major thunderstorms coming on the radar, and they either split and go right around Attleboro, or they hit just west or just south, and they just kind of fizzle out, just nothing's hitting us. I actually read an interesting article the other day, and it talked about drought areas and, what happens in deserts. Not that we're a desert, but it feels like we are. How these storms will roll in, and the way a storm works is it will pick up moisture from the ground, and it will pick up moisture from ponds and small streams. And the theory is these are fizzling out because there's nothing for them to pick up.
And I bring that up because I wanted to drive home the importance of the restrictions. I saw Vice President Corbis, Councilor DeSimone, and Councilor Conti.
Thank you for coming out today. Just so to make sure I'm understanding it, and I know I had a question from a resident that asked about, is this really a big deal? I see that Manchester Reservoir is still at the normal levels, or it doesn't seem lower than normal. What do you mean we're running out of water? And so, correct me, my understanding is it's these other reservoirs that are feeding Manchester that are almost empty now, and so the level of Manchester Reservoir doesn't matter as much as an indicator with regard to the water in the city. Is that accurate?
Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the drought. I would not be concerned if we had adequate levels at Hop and Hill. We wouldn't be going through this. Manchester is fine. Manchester will be fine for the rest of the summer into the fall, into the winter. The concern is the ability to be able to refill it over the winter so that we can use it next spring, use it next summer. We don't want to suck Manchester dry because we may need it in an emergency. Orr's Pond, we talked about runoff. The rivers, probably a good third of the city's storm drains go to Orr's Pond. It's very, very vulnerable. So Manchester needs to be available. And again, we're not running out of water this month. We're not running out of water next month. I'm very worried about next spring.
Which is a great segue to my next question, which was sort of the long-term impact year over year. Have we been seeing that the overall levels are dropping? I'm hearing that the levels at all the different reservoirs is lower now than it was last year or trends in the past. Are we seeing that decreasing year over year, and is there sort of a long-term plan for that if we are? Or is this an anomaly?
It depends on the year. This is a rough drought. All of Massachusetts and all of Rhode Island is in a drought. If you look at central and northeast region, they've been on level 3 restrictions. I keep bringing up the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. They meet once a month, typically, about drought status. They do it all summer. They do it all summer whether or not it rains. Once a month. In July, they met twice, and it was specifically to move one of those regions, as well as the Cape and Islands, into drought status. So there is concern, but this year is really odd. The last time we saw levels like this was 2016. That was the year we could drive by Manchester and look at all the islands out there. But then, you end up with the next year, I believe it was 17 or 18, and downpoured all the way through July. So, I mean, it's getting more unpredictable. If you look at a 5 or a 10-year average, everything remains the same because every ounce of weather we're getting is extreme. So climate change is real, for sure. I see it in our field. It's neither here nor there what's causing it. That's not what we're here for. But we don't just get drizzle. We don't get that normal spring and fall weather anymore. We get major storms or we get drought, and it's really, really unpredictable when it's going to happen.
Excellent. Next question is if we had the interconnect with Pawtucket, is there a cost for that water, and how is it the same? What's the impact of that cost with the Pawtucket interconnect?
There is. Again, that station, once it comes online, will be able to provide 1 million gallons of water per day. The cost of that water ballpark just to purchase the water is about 2 million gallons a year. So it's about a quarter of our budget. Granted, we're also selling it, but at that point, we're selling it for the gap between our rate and theirs. And that gap between their rate and ours, we have to use for electricity to power the station. We have to use for any maintenance of the building. We have to use for chemicals. So basically that gets eaten up. So it is a charge to the water rate payer of an additional $2 million a year, roughly.
Okay.
That's if we used it for a year. It's a nice round number, so.
Okay. And then the last two questions, I'll try to go quick. When you mentioned the with the new restrictions that are coming in this weekend, we're hoping for a drastic drop in production. How drastic? Are we looking? I think you said in the summer it was 6.5 million gallons per day?
Yes.
Day? Yes. What are we looking to see that drop to with these new restrictions?
Your increase, we don't have transient population or anything like that. We don't have people moving in or out. So basically, the increase in our summer production is all due to outdoor water use. If you think about it, you don't use any more water in your house or anything like that between summer and winter, not typically. So you would be looking at hopefully a reduction down to winter production. And our average winter day is somewhere between 3.5 and 3.8 MGD.
Okay.
And that's dependent on the year.
So 3.8.
So we could cut potentially
roughly
almost in half.
30%. All right. Okay. 50% reduction. And then the last thing that I've heard is there was a complaint that an individual had the police show up at their house at 3 a.m. because they had their sprinklers on at 3 a.m. And so who's doing the enforcement of this, and where is that coming from? Is that the water department? Is it the police? How does that all work?
Sure. When we get reports, residents will call and, report a neighbor, report a property that they drive by. So-and-so at this address is watering and they shouldn't be, and we go out, our crew goes out, and we investigate. We say, oh, yes, they are. And then we call police dispatch, and they will go out and they will cite active waterers. There aren't a lot of citations out there yet. There's a couple for repeat offenders that have been called on every day, and they repeatedly try to sneak around the restrictions. In general, the police are given warnings, just making sure people are aware, and they would be handling the enforcement and citations. We also, we don't purposely scour neighborhoods and go and look for people watering, but we do have about 2/3 of our staff is out in the field for most of their day, or at least part of their day, and they will go and keep their eyes out for waters and, again, call dispatch.
Perfect. And then finally, is there anything that we can do to help aside from getting the word out, encouraging people to sign up on the website for the notifications and stuff?
That is the absolute hugest thing that we're having problems with. We figure in the day of social media, this should be a lot easier, and it seems like it's made it worse, unfortunately. But yeah, anything to get the word out, and I am always open to suggestions if anybody else has ideas.
Thank you. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Councilor DeSimone, then Councilor Conti, then Councilor Blair.
Thank you, President Delicio. So Courtney, first of all, thank you for coming as usual and sharing your expertise. You and I have been going back in emails on this issue for almost a month now, and I appreciate your prompt replies and patience with me. And I appreciate Councilor Kobus' question about costs, because I don't know if people fully appreciate that the water from Pawtucket ain't coming for free, nor is it intended to sustain convenience. It's intended as an emergency measure in the true sense of that word. So, we are where we are. You don't control the weather. The connection, issues with the connection precede you. So that it is what it is. We are where we are. My focus is on the present and the future. And you and I talked about a couple of things that, moving forward, droughts may happen, right? They happen, they don't. But I think we need to continue working towards a conservation mindset, right? Even if we get 10 inches of rain tomorrow, we still have to begin thinking about conserving water. And I understand you're doing an education program in the city schools. I don't know if you want to tell the council. And I want to talk about what else we can do to start getting the community used to this idea of, conservation is always going to be with us from here on out, right? So can you tell the council what you're doing and maybe what you're thinking about doing down the road to continue these educational efforts?
Sure. We actually started doing education with some of the 5th grades. That started this spring, and I would love to start it up in the fall because, well, kids are the best people to get news out to everybody, especially at that age. I have one that age. They're easier to communicate. They're, I don't want to say easily influenced because that doesn't sound right, but they're the up and coming. They can encourage their family, they can encourage their friends. But what we actually do, we send the operators out. We've had a couple of them go out to the classrooms. They talk about the water cycle. They talk about, the entire hydrology of the earth, basically, and how much of the water on earth is actually drinkable. They talk about why we can't drink the ocean. If we could, we wouldn't be in this situation. But fresh water and accessible well water, surface water, 0.5% of it on the earth is drinkable. And it's becoming more and more and more valuable as the population goes up, and we stress this with them. Ways not to waste water, ways to look for leaks, ways that you should water your garden so that you don't have to water it as much. Like really, really simple things. But kids are a really, really great group to start with because they're interested. But like I don't really have a better way to say it. They're very, very invested in their environment and very, very invested in the world around them. We do have educational information on our website for kids. It is basically an overview of what's presented when we go out to the classrooms, and they're easier to reach. We do have conservation measures that are on conservation information, what to do to not waste water. For adults, I change it up once in a while. With an adult where you don't have them in a classroom and they're not a captive audience, I can't guarantee you anybody reads it, but it's there.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I think I can speak for the council and say I would support, and I hope I can say we would support your efforts to continue educating the kids in school. I think that's definitely a way to go, right? Because that will speak to the future. Relatedly, in terms of conservation, you and I talked very briefly about other ways to combat, to conserve and to educate folks and to some degree, start to decrease the ability of people to use as much water. We talked about an interdepartmental approach, particularly through planning and the city planner's office about development issues. Are there things we can do in new developments to recommend, as you said, I think, terrain, if you will, that requires less water than lawn and that kind of stuff. Right. Has that conversation begun? Are you talking to the city planner?
It has not yet.
Okay.
This has been taking up.
Understood. Understood.
But yeah, if I can speak to that, a discussion that Counselor DeSimone and I had. It actually started with irrigations. I'll start way back then. Would we be able to make sure there's no underground irrigations in new properties? And I think that's a very, very hard sell with somebody spending a lot of money on a house. Registering irrigations. That's also a hard sell because there's a lot out there that we don't know are there. They'll go on new homes. We don't necessarily know. Current ordinance says that they're supposed to be equipped with water-saving sensors, rain sensors, things like that, that are supposed to be approved by the building department and the water department. I have never seen an approval submitted to my department for one of these. So we just don't know where the irrigation systems are. So then it turned into a discussion of the big, beautiful lawns that need lots of water. Grass needs a lot of water. Grass needs a tremendous amount of water. Native plants don't. I have a yard right now. I'm not watering. My grass it's awful. I've never seen it look like this. However, I have native plants that are thriving. I have 7-foot sunflowers because they belong here. So maybe encouraging that some portion of the new landscaping for these developments has these native plants that can live through a drought and be happy doing it. So I really do think that's more the way to go.
If I may have one more question, if I may.
We could just kind of keep
Yep, okay.
focused. Thank you.
Lastly, we spoke about our current water emergency provision 16-12.24. You and I talked about it. I did find some model language on the state DEP website that I think will help to further define these issues and things that the city can and can't do in that regard. So I'm going to send you a draft that I put together, and would you be open to considering amending our water emergency provisions as they stand now with an eye towards the future?
Absolutely.
And do you think that would be warranted?
I think it is. We're standing here in 2022, and, this is the first time I think I've dealt with a drought quite this bad. The way the climate and everything's going, I could be back down here again in 2024. And I imagine I probably would be in the same situation at this point.
Understood. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, President.
Thank you for your questions. Before I get to Councilor Conti, you said something that made me think. You talked about leaks.
I'm sorry?
You mentioned leaks when we were talking about it, and what about our own infrastructure as it relates to leaks? Is that a concern that, as we go forward, that could help mitigate some of this going forward? Do we have an opportunity where we have this ARPA money and potentially other projects? Because it sounds real risky when we're looking at just conservation and keeping an eye on the sky to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Sure. Leaks. We've done a lot of work on leaks and internal conservation in our own department over the last several years. One of the items that is in our withdrawal permits for our plants is a requirement to meet or be less than 10% water loss, or 10% unaccounted for water, the state calls it. And what that 10% means is, say we produce some volume of water, we sell some other volume of water. There is a gap. And the state requires that that gap be less than 10%. And it's not the gap between the sale and the production, it's the gap between more of the production and that portion that we don't know where it went. Leaks are inherent in a system, especially in an older system. Years ago, that unaccounted water for water number was reported commonly at 20% or more. We started looking at, quick and easy, are our master meters at the plant right? And if they're not, that can lead to huge false numbers. We started looking at, are we recording main breaks, hydrant flushing, that sort of thing, because those are the easiest. It's basically math and tracking. The next thing to look at, that we looked at and it's ongoing, and it's been ongoing forever, is the meters out in the system and upgrading those. And all of those meters that we're upgrading, the every one that comes out and still measuring 99%, there's another one that might be missing 5% of the water, and that adds up. We started looking at the larger meters at the businesses, and that's going to be ongoing forever. Basically making sure they're in calibration, making sure they're in repair and they're actually registering. But that's not actual water loss. The biggest thing that we ended up doing, the state likes us to do leak detection. They require that we actually go and do a leak detection survey. We hire somebody out. They come in once a year, and they go on every main, every hydrant, and every service in the entire city, including our areas in North Attleboro and Mansfield. And they tell us where they find a leak. They tell us the volume of it, severity, and these are things that aren't surfacing. We would never know they're there if we don't look for them. State requires this every 3 years. We do it every year. Every single year. This year there was about 3 dozen on the list that were public. They finished in March. We fixed all of them but 3. So we are moving along. So that 20% unaccounted for water that we couldn't find several years ago, we have it down to 7, which is, it's low. It's certainly low. And we continue to look for it. And again, leaks, there is going to be some leakage in an old system. There just is. But
Thank you for that clarification.
yeah.
Certainly appreciate it. Council Conti, thank you for your
Thank you.
patience.
Courtney, we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about Pawtucket and money, we're going to talk about planning, and we're going to talk about restrictions.
Okay.
Starting with Pawtucket. I was sitting here when Paul Kennedy was standing there, talking about how it's a good idea to connect with Pawtucket. And it wasn't 2016, it was 2014.
He came to us in 15.
15?
Probably
Okay,
15.
Nope, well, about a year. We agreed that we would spend $500,000 in an engineering study to see if it would work, and we've spent millions and millions of dollars since. We're now at the point where we're being asked to spend $4 million for a variable speed pump system to make the connection. And this is after we've had to assess land, de-access land, move things around down in Pawtucket, discover what we own and what we didn't own. And no one's talking about whether or not we should stop this expensive project. We all see that we need now this project,
Yes.
but a full accounting of how much this has cost the city has never been made, and I'm sure it's a shocking number, together with what's coming down the pike with the 4 million, which won't be 4 million. It'll be 5 million or 6 million because it's 2 years out.
And it's still, prices are
That's right.
still
So
escalating.
we're in agreement on that. This is a very expensive proposition.
Yes.
For 2 million gallons, 1 million gallons per day capability
Yes.
on a system that would typically use 3.5 to 3.8 during the winter.
Yes.
So it's a big connection. At a $2 million cost per year if it was open all the time and running, which it won't be.
It will not be.
Right, so this is going to be a big development to connect the systems up and shut it off. And the only time we'll open it up is to test it. Maybe there's a clause for testing. Is it 4 times a year, or is it every other month, every month?
Richard, if I may, is there a question in there
Yep.
about the current situation we're
The
in?
cost, I'm trying to get to the cost of this system and the fact that it's not intended to be used. Am I correct?
Right. The requirement on the state permit is that we exercise the station 4 times a year. So we set it up, we make sure everything works, the chem feeds work, it's available, and it's ready. One of those 4 times, we have to put the water to the system. So we're gonna use it for spring flushing.
And there's a guaranteed minimum payment to Pawtucket a year.
There is not.
There is not, okay, good.
not.
Let's move on to the plan. I come across my desk today that the City of Attleboro is going out for a water management plan. Can you elaborate on that?
For the,
I think it's a wastewater.
Was it wastewater?
Yes, sir. I think the one that came out today, I saw it too, and I had the same thought, but I believe it's a wastewater plan.
wow, I really thought I missed something.
Yep, well, you're good, you're clear. So the last thing is on restrictions. You're saying that it's getting to be more unpredictable, and to me, that means that the city needs to develop faster response times.
Yes.
So, we set the water rate once a year. And when we set that water rate, we're not thinking about droughts.
No, we're not.
I found today, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter, I just gave it to you before the meeting started.
21G.
It's Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 21G, that allows a municipality, before I get there, I want to ask you this question. If production does not drop and the rain does not come, what is level 4?
Level 4 is basically we can't restrict any more than we are without telling people, oh, you're getting bad. I mean, level 4 is to the point you're trying to curtail indoor use. You're telling people, okay, wash your dishes in the sink and then use the water to water your plants in your house. It's not flushing every time you use that's a level 4. Level 4 is up there. We have a relatively local community to us. I'll give you an example. They're not in a level 4, they're in the level 3 area. They're not hydrant flushing, there's no outdoor use. There's no hydrant use for their fire department, their trucking and water, that's still a level 3. And level 4 is, again, worse. You're looking at trying to curtail water for sanitary use. You're looking at, a level 4 that we would try to purchase water from outside of the area for drinking water.
So, given that level 4 is the next level, and that next spring is when we're going to know whether or not we're in dire straits on refilling our reservoirs, this Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 21G, allows for a water management program in an emergency to curtail several domestic uses. You've already got a leak detection program. That's described in here. We've got auditing of water usage, which is going on, but it also discusses a ban on issuing a moratorium on the issuance of building permits. And you can't do this for a long period of time. You can only do this for a temporary amount of time. So if the water supply is getting more unpredictable, it seems to make sense to me that this council should be thinking about how do we enact a moratorium on building until you get the Wading River up to 100%,
Right.
free of PFAS. And you think that's 2 years out?
That is looking at temporary treatment. Again, we're looking at lead time delays. We originally expected May, which has come and gone. The next estimate was October, which is also going to come and go. We're looking at early spring, very likely, to get temporary treatment in place, and that will be 1 million gallons a day. Final on Wading River, I mean, you're looking at least late '24 to have that plant upgraded, and that is excessively hopeful. And that would be at capacity at 2 million gallons a day.
And so right now in the city planning process, there is no evaluation of how much water usage is coming online with a new subdivision.
There's really not. I see it, if you have a mill or a factory, or we have the dispensaries and things like that that use a lot of water, they'll give me, hey, we think we're going to use 80,000 gallons a day. I don't really get that for subdivisions, and it's really kind of hard to predict because you don't know who's moving in, is some of it. I could give you a ballpark number on what they would use. They're not, if they're not irrigating, they're not a huge water user. Your average person uses about 50 to 55 gallons a day.
So I'll leave you with just one last thing.
Yeah.
So perhaps you would like to talk to the assessor, Julie. That the assessor has the ability to tax residential irrigation systems. It's underground pipes, waters, and systems.
Okay.
And that if she were to start an aggressive program of discovering those irrigation systems and taxing them, there might be a curtailment of the number of irrigation systems in the city. So maybe that discussion needs to get started. And that concludes my comments, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Blair?
I think some of my questions have been answered, Jim, James, but getting to, you said we have a definite cost if we hook up to Pawtucket.
Yes.
If you, maybe I'm a retailer, you don't have anything on the shelf, you can't sell it, right? So if we buy it and sell it, there's got to be a wash there somewhere.
There is.
If you don't have it, you can't sell it to somebody.
Right. Once that's in place, again, say we assume we run it for a year. So we have that $2 million of cost to them. The difference with that is, again, we're adding chemicals and everything else, and then we're selling it. So that same 1 million gallons a year, if we were selling it and making it at West Street or Wading River, would not cost us what we're going to pay for.
Oh, I understand that, but it's not a complete cost.
Right.
You're getting something for what you're buying. You are reselling it.
Right.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions for Superintendent Allen?
I have one.
Council Waterman?
Thank you. Because I came in after 2016, so maybe I missed something regarding the hookup. What happens if we need water from that hookup and they're in a stage 2 or stage 3 drought?
Then they actually, in the agreement, they don't have to sell the water. I mean, if they don't have it and don't have the ability to sell it, they cannot sell it. 2016 is a really good example because it's the last time we went through something that was of this level. That was the year that we actually had a calculated date that Manchester was going to be empty. We'd had Wading River had been down for the year previous. Hoppin Hill was empty for dam rehabilitation. We'd had a tank site down, and then a drought hit. It was like everything that could go wrong in the water department at the same time went wrong, and then there was the drought. And here we were, everybody in the 10-mile watershed and in the Taunton that feeds our other plant, we're all in a severe drought. Pawtucket is in, believe it or not, even though we can almost throw a rock from Oz Pond to Robbins Hollow, was not in a drought. They're in a different watershed. They're in Abbott Run, which is actually part of the Blackstone. It's a larger watershed, bigger primary river. The likelihood of both being in that dire of a circumstance in the same time isn't that great, but I'm not going to tell you it can't happen.
Sure.
Vice President Cobus?
Thank you. And one more question. Since you brought up Wading River, I know, I think it was a few weeks ago, we had been talking about bringing Wading River online. And with the PFAS levels being increased and how that will disproportionately impact Ward 3 and Ward 4 because Wading River primarily feeds those two wards. Is Wading River online now? And you had talked about the temporary mitigation being able to allow treat 1 million gallons per day.
Yes.
Is it online now? And I know we just had the water main break at Bungie Road, and it came offline,
And it was
I think
back
it's
online within a couple hours. Yep.
Okay, so it's back online. And what's the production looking like for that? Is it doing 1 million gallons, 2 million?
Right now, we're at 1.4 million gallons.
Okay.
We could do more, and here is why we are not. Again, we're low up there, too. We're releasing from Miramichi. If, we could get as much as 2 million gallons a day out of there. The concern there is instead of draining this end of our reservoir system, we're gonna drain that end of our reservoir system, which we don't wanna do. Again, you know, you could drain it and shut down that plant and not worry about it. However, we have piloting going on up there, so we need that plant continuously running. They're still pilot testing for PFAS removal. We're going to have the second phase of the piloting for the THM precursor removal, so the plant needs to remain running. So we're running it kind of slow and steady to preserve the water system up there, the reservoir levels.
Perfect. That's my question. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Courtney, a very remedial question, if I may, and this is one that I've been asked. Are interconnections the only way for water to come in from other sources?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I figured, but I think it's an important note to drive home.
Yeah, and, you know, there's been internal talk, again, you know, I've mentioned tonight that Pawtucket is our only direct neighbor that's big enough to feed us. The reservoir system's huge, the plant's huge. I can't say it will never happen that they say no because of a drought. It could, but they're least likely to. Where was I going with this? I'm sorry.
It's fine, I think.
I'm sorry, Jay, what was your question?
Don't worry about it. I think it's fine. Just interconnections being the only way to transport water from other
Interconnections,
sources.
yeah. Again, our other three connected departments are not large enough. If this situation gets worse, I've talked internally with staff of getting in touch with DEP and seeing if we can do, some of you were on council at the time, that original temporary hydrant to hydrant connection with Pawtucket, just to bring something in. Again, it's not permitted, but it is something the state may allow if our situation gets worse, and it doesn't get worse for one of our neighbors.
Councilor Conti.
Do we have a contractual agreement with Lake Miramichi? That was a political cauldron back in 2016. We essentially drained the lake, and they weren't too happy about it.
We do. We didn't really drain the lake. It was lower than we'd had it in years, but it has been lower. At the time, there were very outspoken groups that, you probably remember the picture of the person's dock, and it showed up in the paper, it showed up on the news, it was getting stapled on trees up near Lake Miramichi of the dock and the mud under the dock, and people like, oh my God, the lake's empty. The lake's only 2 feet deep at that dock. It's not a deep lake. We only drew down about 3 feet before we stopped releasing. Is it a lot of water? Yes. Do we intend to draw the lake that low? No. There are people that live on the lake. We do technically share the lake with 2 other departments. They don't draw surface water, but Plainville and Foxborough both have well fields near the lake. So once we get to the 18-inch mark from full, they have to start shutting down wells. So we don't like to do that to them unless we have to, but we do still have the authority to use the water.
That just adds another dimension to your interconnection question.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right.
Yeah, we also have an agreement with Crocker Pond, which we own the dam. We own the surface water if it's spilling, and then we owe some level below full, and it's not that much. I can't honestly remember. We don't purposely release from there, but Rentham has well fields around Crocker Pond. The reason we will not purposely release from there is there's between Crocker Pond that would come down and through down Miramichi, and it would come down to feed the Wading River plant. There's cranberry bogs and all sorts of people using water in between Crocker Pond and where we actually use it. So if we release it, it's just going to get used in between, if that makes any sense. And then Rentham will be worrying about their wells. So that's not the greatest source either.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments, concerns? Councilor
That's one more.
DeSimone.
I'm sorry. Courtney, so we're all in this together. How much is our fate, if you will, determined by what our surrounding municipalities are doing in terms of restrictions and enforcement of those restrictions? Is that something you have a conversation with your colleagues and other water departments?
We do. It falls into, I mean, we're kind of all in the same boat. In the Taunton Basin, you're looking at, basically almost everybody has had their withdrawal permit issued by the state. We're mandated, because we have, typical year, we have a lot of resiliency, so we're mandated to have some sort of restrictions, May to September, and we just do those, don't use your automatic irrigation between 9 and 5, and we call it a day. Other departments that we share the watershed with, they'll do odd even. You have your house number 1, you get odd days of the month, and house number 2 gets even days. They'll do things like that, or they'll go down to, all right, everybody has to water on Mondays, but do whatever you want when you do. And everywhere in between. Some of the permits, and there's dozens of them in each basin, I can't tell you who, when the state starts increasing the levels on the drought regions, they have to follow certain steps. We don't. We do it, but we're actually not required. But I mean, we are kind of all looking out for each other. It's going to end up in the 10-mile too. The permits are starting to fall, and we're expecting our permit for, that would be the West Street plant. We're expecting it sometime this year. But same thing, I mean, everybody is restricting around us.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you. All right, well, Courtney, thank you for coming down tonight, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't thank you, and especially the job that you and every employee at the water department's doing right now. This certainly can't be an easy time for them, and, we appreciate the work that you're doing and that your entire department is doing. We'll connect this week or next about another date when to come in for an update, if that's still favorable to you to give us an update.
Absolutely.
And in the meantime, I think we all should be really hoping for some rain.
Oh, I see it in the forecast next week, and I'm hoping it just doesn't hit us and go around, because that seems to be the habit this summer. But
Agreed. All right. Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. We adjourned at 7:13. Thank you all. Good discussion.
Thank you, Courtney.